Here we go. Again, if you didn't get our free book, it's there at the table. Just scan that QR code, or if you don't have a phone to do that, just go to the table. They'll help you get our latest book, The Testable Faith. Topic, why the universe is the way it is. Wrote this book a number of years ago, and it was proved to be so popular that we wound up developing a small group DVD teaching series. It's a series of 8 22-minute talks that we use as a springboard for Q&A. It's really a way to get people who are brand new to the Christian faith or not yet Christians to begin a dialogue about these issues. And the core of the new atheism is that the universe is a messed up job. So we got people like Stephen Hawking saying, our solar system is certainly a prerequisite for our existence, but there does not seem to be a need for all those other galaxies. And years ago, I debated Victor Stenger at the International Skeptic Society conference. He's a particle physicist, famous atheist. And this is what he wrote in his book, God, the Failed Hypothesis. If God created the universe for humanity, he wasted huge amounts of matter, energy, space, and time. And we went on to say, it seems inconceivable that a creator exists who has a special love for humanity and then relegated it to a tiny point in space and time. If God was really loving, he would give us access to the entirety of the universe. But I like what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, and you look at the universe, it's clear it's out to kill us. And then Victor Stenger went on to say, does God really need so much pain and suffering to achieve his ends? This is a possible God, but a hideous one. Now, what they're all overlooking is that, yes, the universe could be made in a better way if God had only one purpose for creating the universe. And a lot of the atheist scientists I engage, they think that the only reason God had for creating the universe is to make a home for us human beings. But if you read why the universe is the way it is, I lay out at least 12 different purposes for God making and designing the universe the way he did. There may be more, but there's 12 that we know of. And the job is, how can the universe be designed in such a way as to optimally fulfill the 12 known purposes for God making the universe the way he did? Now, if you came to the session I gave earlier today, I talked about how this issue of why the universe is the way it is was a dialogue I had with an atheist quantum physicist on an airplane a number of years ago, and how he began to pepper me with questions throughout the flight. And basically, he peppered me with the 8 questions that are the topics for 8 chapters in the book, Why the Universe is the Way It Is. I actually showed him the book, and he was utterly amazed. Hey, these are my questions. But one of those questions he asked is, why is the universe so very massive? And as I mentioned in my talk earlier this morning, the universe's mass determines its makeup of elements. And that the greater the cosmic mass density, the faster the universe goes through the temperature zone in which hydrogen is fused into helium. The universe begins with only one element, hydrogen. But as the universe cools off in the cosmic creation event, it spends about 20 seconds in that temperature range where hydrogen can be fused into helium. But if the universe is less massive than what it is, it doesn't spend 20 seconds. It only spends 19 or 18 seconds in that temperature window. And that means that so little helium is fused from the primordial hydrogen that the future stars are unable to take that mix of hydrogen and helium and manufacture any elements heavier than helium. Which means that our periodic table would look like this. And any of you have been terrified by chemistry class? If this was all a periodic table looked like, I think it would really make you look, chemistry would be an easy course to pass. Now, you have a different problem if you make the universe slightly more massive. Instead of spending 20 seconds in that temperature window, the universe now spends 22 or 23 seconds, or maybe even a whole minute. Even if it spends just 21 seconds, that means so much helium is fused from the primordial hydrogen that the future stars very quickly convert all the hydrogen and helium in the universe into elements heavier than manganese. And in such a universe, this is what the periodic table looks like. Notice in both cases, you got a periodic table that's got no phosphorus, no oxygen, no nitrogen, no carbon, and therefore no possibility for life. The universe must be precisely the mass it is to within 1 part in a quadrillion, 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 quadrillion in order to get this periodic table. These are the elements we see in the periodic table. And 22 of these elements are what we call essential poisons, which means that, for example, arsenic is what we call a vital poison. If you've got too little of it in your body, you'll die. Too much in your body, you'll also die. And there are 22 elements in the periodic table that are in that category. Too little, you die. Too much, you die. They have to be just right. And we know of only one body in the universe where those 22 vital poisons are at exactly the right level so that we can live and thrive. Matter of fact, every element you see in that periodic table, with the exception of magnesium and iron, are highly anomalous here on planet Earth. So for example, we've got 60 times less sulfur than the rest of the rocky bodies in the universe. We got 90 times more titanium, 90 times more aluminum. Everything is anomalous, but it's anomalous in exactly the right proportion we need for advanced life to be possible here on planet Earth. And I don't know how many of you ever watched that movie, The Martian, where it shows Matt Damon on Mars, and it shows him walking around. I remember telling my sons, you can't walk like that on Mars. You can't walk more than about 1/4 of a mile before you're going to injure yourself. There isn't the right gravity. And you can't grow potatoes on Martian soil. There's 60 times as much sulfur. You can't do that. It's going to have to be 100% human poop, and that's going to be a problem. And I remember my sons telling me, Dad, we don't want to know how many times this movie is violating the laws of physics. So I shut up. But there's another reason why the universe has to be precisely the mass that it is. It needs to expand at the just right rate in order to get stars and galaxies and planets. So make the universe the tiniest bit less massive, it'll expand so rapidly from the cosmic creation event that gravity will never be able to collect the gas of the universe to make stars, planets, and galaxies. The universe would be forever 100% diffuse gas. Make it the tiniest bit more massive, gravity will be so powerful, it'll pull all the cosmic gas and convert it into nothing but black holes and neutron stars, where the density exceeds 2 billion tons per level teaspoonful. Can you imagine taking a cup of coffee and putting a teaspoonful in that weighs 2 billion tons? Well, the density is so extreme, molecules are impossible, atoms are impossible, and of course life is impossible. But we live in a just right universe. The cosmic mass density, where the tiniest fraction, greater or smaller, no life would be possible anytime, anywhere in the universe. Right now, we do know that that fine-tuning of 1 part in 10 to the 60th, change the mass by as little as that, you get no possibility for life. We now know we don't need it to be quite so fine-tuned, because dark energy plays a more crucial role in getting the universe to expand at exactly the right rate. And so we have reduced the fine-tuning in the cosmic mass density, not by much, just by a little. But now we have fine-tuning of 1 part in 10 to the 122nd power in dark energy. So the discovery of dark energy, people thought this is going to reduce the fine-tuning. It enhanced the fine-tuning. And I'm saying that as a general principle. Every time we've discovered something new about the universe that we didn't know before, it's enhanced the fine-tuning evidence. It's never decreased it. And we're predicting that will continue on into the future. I'm looking forward to the new discoveries. Well, a quantum physicist also asked me, why does God need to wait nearly 14 billion years before bringing us on the cosmic scene? And as I explained in the morning session, if we were created any earlier, or later in the history of the universe, we astronomers would not be able to see 100% of the history of the universe. So for example, if God put us here 5 billion years earlier, we'd only be seeing the last 70% of the history of the universe. We would not be able to witness the cosmic creation event. There wouldn't be enough time for that light to travel along the space surface of the universe and reach our telescopes. But if we were here any later, dark energy would be accelerating the farthest reaches of the universe at greater than the velocity of light, which means we would not be able to see the cosmic creation event. And it's our ability to directly witness the cosmic creation event by looking 13.8 billion light years away that gives us the most compelling evidence that there must be a God beyond space and time that created the universe. Somebody wanted us to read the book. Only at 13.79 billion years after the cosmic creation event can humans observe all of cosmic history and directly witness the cosmic creation event. Now, the quantum physicists asked me, are there any other reasons why the universe has to be exactly the age that it is? I said, well, I can think of at least a dozen. He said, well, give me one. Well, I actually gave him two, but here's the one that I started with, saying, first of all, if you want to have a planet with a magnetic field that protects life from solar and cosmic radiation, you need a planet that's super endowed with uranium and thorium. These are radiometric elements, and they radiate heat as they decay. And that heat source is crucial to keep our liquid iron core liquid so that we have a magnetic field. It's also crucial to provide the energy for plate tectonics so that we can have oceans and continents. And that uranium and thorium abundance reaches a peak abundance in the history of the universe when the universe is slightly more than 9 billion years old. When did that peak occur? It occurred 4.5 billion years ago. When did the Earth form? 4.5662 billion years ago. It formed at the very best time to be super endowed with uranium and thorium. And my quantum physicist friend on the airplane said, well, that's 4.5 billion years ago. Why the extra 4.5 billion years? And I said, well, it's because stars are like human beings. They're unstable when they're young, they're unstable when they're old. They're maximally stable when they're middle-aged. In the case of stars, the time of stability is incredibly brief. I mean, our star has been burning for 4.5 billion years, but only about 50,000 years ago did its luminosity become stable enough and its flaring activity low enough to permit the existence of global human civilization. That vertical axis is logarithmic. When the sun was young, the flaring activity was 100,000 times greater than it is today. And so you need to add 9.2 billion plus about 4.7 billion to get the optimal time. And then he said, well, why is the universe so dark? Well, this is review. I'm going to go through this quickly. It's something I mentioned even in my first talk, that the universe is 99.73% dark stuff. The stars, planets, and galaxies and nebulae, that only adds up to 0.27% of the universe. But that dark stuff, both the dark energy and the exotic dark matter and the ordinary dark matter, all of it must be exquisitely fine-tuned in order to make life possible in the universe. Just based on dark energy alone, it must be fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 122nd power, or no life would be possible anytime, anywhere in the universe. And as I mentioned in my opening talk, that exceeds the best example of human engineering design by a factor of 10 to the 97 times, which means that the one that designed dark energy and dark matter and ordinary dark matter so that we human beings can exist in the universe at a minimum must be 10 to the 97 times more intelligent and more knowledgeable than our most brilliant scientists, and at least that many times better funded than the governments of the world that are making these amazing machines that rank as the best design material. But I shared with the quantum physicists that not only must the universe as a whole be exceptionally dark, it's crucial that we human beings be living in the darkest part of the universe where life is possible. Just for our own existence, but also for the capability of us astronomers being able to read the entire book of nature from the present moment all the way back to the cosmic creation event. This is possible because we live in the darkest super galaxy cluster in the universe. There are tens of thousands of super galaxy clusters. A super galaxy cluster is a cluster of clusters of galaxies. And all but the one we live in basically can be described as a basketball-shaped super galaxy cluster or a football-shaped one, where the clusters of galaxies are jammed tightly together. When you look at, say, the Shapley super galaxy cluster, all you see are galaxy clusters jammed so tightly together that all you see is a glowing ball of light there. The only exception is the Laniakea super galaxy cluster that we live in. Instead of the galaxy clusters all being jammed so tightly together, they look like one giant ball of clusters of galaxies. We see that the clusters are stretched out along these long filaments. So instead of resembling a basketball just packed tightly with clusters of galaxies, it looks more like a praying mantis insect, where the galaxy groups and galaxy clusters are strung out along these long filaments and subfilaments. And you see that little red dot there that's kind of in the upper center? That's our local group. Notice we're in the least dense part of the super galaxy cluster where there are filaments. Life is only possible if you're along a subfilament, and we live at the nexus of three subfilaments. We live in the least populated grouping of galaxies. And here's a map that we developed at Reasons to Believe. I think we're the only ones that have produced such a map. It shows our local group of galaxies and shows what's special about the local group is that it has no giant galaxies. All the other groupings of galaxies we look at, they're populated by giant galaxies and many large galaxies. In our case, no giant galaxies, only two large galaxies, the Milky Way galaxy at the lower right and the Andromeda galaxy at the upper left. And unlike these other groupings of galaxies where the large galaxies are close together, in the local group, they're far apart. The Andromeda galaxy is 2.5 million light years away. And there are some dwarf galaxies. What I show here are the 5 dwarf galaxies that are big enough that you can see them. But it's such that where we are in the Milky Way galaxy is that the galaxies around us do not block out our view of the very distant universe, which corresponds to the early universe. And as we look inside our Milky Way galaxy, we see that our solar system is halfway between the Perseus and Sagittarius spiral arms, the darkest place in our Milky Way galaxy where life is actually possible. And then we zoom in and we discover that we happen to exist on the inside part of the local arm. And if you look at that local arm, you can see we're existing on that part of the local arm where we have a paucity of bright nearby stars and dense interstellar molecular clouds. And we're inside what's called the local bubble. That local bubble is a region in the inner side of the local arm where supernova eruptions about 10 to 12 million years ago blew out all the stars and gas and created a cavity. And our solar system is in the midst of that cavity. And because we're in the midst of that cavity, the night sky is dark enough that we can see all the way out to the very extreme reaches of the universe. Then we look inside the local bubble. That white part is the local bubble. That yellow part is something called the local fluff. And that local fluff is again a region where we see a slightly greater density than we see in the local bubble, but it also ensures that not only are we safe from deadly radiation, we can do extragalactic astronomy. And only 200,000 years ago did our sun, with a system of planets, move into the center of the local fluff. And we're going to be moving out in about another 100,000 years. But right now, we're in that optimal location where it's safe for advanced life, but also makes possible our ability to observe the entire extent of the universe. I say all of this because I run into astronomers sometimes who'll say, well, Yeah, we're here at the one time in the history of the universe where we can actually observe the entirety of the universe. I say, we think that's just a sheer coincidence. But I said, our universe contains 2 trillion galaxies. And each of those galaxies contains hundreds of billions of stars. And yet, as vast as the universe is, with all those galaxies, we're in the only place within the vastness of the universe where we actually have the capability of observing the entire history of the universe. It may be a sheer coincidence that we're at the one time, but it can't be a sheer coincidence that we're simultaneously at the only location in this vast universe of 2 trillion galaxies where we can see the whole story. I think somebody wanted us to be able to read the book. Somebody wanted us to read the book of the 66 books of the Bible. Someone also wanted us to be able to read the book of nature. There must be some reason why God wanted us to see all of his cosmic designs. And it's that ability to see the entire history of the universe and the entire extent of the universe that allows us to discern the multiple reasons why God made the universe the way he did. There's not just one reason, there's multiple reasons. And then why is the universe so entropic? If there's really a God out there that's all powerful and all loving, why would he subject his creatures to so much decay? I mean, it's not just a little bit of decay, there's a lot of decay. I mean, I was a graduate student at the University of Toronto, and they have winters there. And what do? They throw salt on the roads. What does that salt do? It means every 4 years you got to replace your automobile. And last time I checked, automobiles are not cheap. And so it's expensive to live in Toronto because of how rapidly thermodynamics and salt causes your car to decay. Never mind all your shoes. I had to replace my shoes every couple of years because of all the salt that was there and the second law of thermodynamics. Why is the universe decaying so much? Why does God subject us to so much decay? I can put it this way, John 16:33, in this world you'll have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world. I can paraphrase that. In this world you'll have thermodynamics, but take heart, I've overcome thermodynamics. And I'll basically make the point in a minute. When we get to the last 2 chapters of the Bible, what does it say? No decay, no death. No thermodynamics in the new creation. Why do we need so much thermodynamics in this creation? Well, there are multiple reasons. I spent over a half hour talking about those reasons with this quantum physicist. But basically I made the point, God designed the universe for the redemption of billions of humans and the permanent eradication of evil. That's the primary reason why God designed the universe with exactly the thermodynamics he did, the gravity, the electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. God designed the laws of physics for the removal of evil and for willing humans to receive redemption and enhance free will. That's a crucial feature. God not only created the universe to be a tool in his hands to permanently eradicate all evil and suffering, his intent was that simultaneously he would enhance the free will capability of humans who desired to spend eternity with him to experience exponentially more love and be able to express exponentially more love. God could have created us with weak free will, which means that the problem of evil would be much easier to resolve. But with weak free will, you got weak love. God wanted strong love, so he created us with strong free will, which meant that he knew that there would be numbers of us who would say, I want nothing to do with you, God. And God says, fine. You have a choice. You can spend eternity with me, or if you want nothing to do with me, I got another place where you'll have nothing to do with me. We get to choose who we spend eternity with. And it tells us in Romans 8, verses 21 and 22, the entire creation, the entire universe has been groaning, subject to its bondage to decay. And that's something we physicists have noted. Everything within the universe is subject to this pervasive law of decay. But it's crucial if you want life. If you want life, it's crucial that there be a tremendous amount of decay. Without it, stars will never form. Stars will not be able to burn any stable way. Planets will not form, and there'll be no possibility for life. It's also crucial we have a very high measure of thermodynamics, rate of decay, so that plants can produce food. Plants cannot produce food unless there's a very high rate of decay in the universe, and likewise animals can't consume the food that plants provide and digest it and use the energy from that to produce work. So just to have physical life in the universe requires a very high level of decay. But simultaneously, that level of decay is optimized for the restraint of evil. It's optimal also for preparing humans for their new role in the new creation. I remember when I entered the undergraduate program for physics at the University of British Columbia, and they said, this is different from the rest of the universities in Canada. You're going to get your degree in 4 years instead of 5 years, but we're going to have to work you to death. And what the professor shared with us, it says, my number one role as your professor is to make you suffer. And I'm going to try to optimize the suffering so that you maximally benefit from the instruction I give you. His comment was, if I make you suffer too much, you'll all give up. But if I don't make you suffer enough, you're not going to really learn what you need to learn in 4 years instead of 5 years. And yeah, it was rough. I mean, my senior year, it was 38 classroom hours. They only gave us 18 units of credit, but it was 38 classroom hours. But boy, it sure prepared me for grad school. So in one sense, I don't regret all the sleep I lost during that year. But the thing we notice is that it's also optimized for the restraint of evil. And two things we notice. The decay rate is not so high as to discourage productive work. I don't care what occupation you have, what career you have, everything you do in terms of your work will decay and become meaningless. I mean, I write books. But I recognize maybe 50 years my books will have an impact on people. After that, nothing. But hey, it's 50 years. And maybe it takes me 5 years to write a book, but hey, it has a lifetime of 50 years. And as I was sharing in the second message I gave today, is that my wife really likes to have the front yard and the backyard looking kind of a pristine way. And the problem is, I can spend 5 hours on a Saturday getting the backyard to look the way she wants it. 2 weeks later, I got to do it all over again. The rate of decay in our garden is quite high. So I'm not as motivated to do gardening as I am to write books, because it decays faster. So, but hey, I got to keep my wife happy, so I will do it once in a while. Although to be honest, I hire a gardener so that I don't have to do quite so much yard work. But the other thing we notice is the decay rate is not so low as to let human sin go unrestrained. And it's something you see in Genesis chapter 3. Here we have Adam and Eve in the garden. They decide to experience evil personally rather than let God instruct them about evil. They took it upon themselves to experience it personally. And God says, because of your decision, he says to the woman, from now on, you're going to experience more pain in childbirth. And he says to the man, from now on, you're going to experience more work. Now, it's not work for the first time. Adam was working the Garden of Eden before he sinned. But what God says, and it says this in Genesis 3:17, cursed is the ground because of you. The laws of physics didn't change. Nothing changed in the ground. But what God is saying, because you're a sinner managing the ground, it's not going to produce the way it did before you sinned. And we see this all over the world. We humans abuse our agricultural land, and it doesn't produce in the way that God intended. Now, it's not just men that experience more work. Women experience more work as well. And so God meant this generically. As my wife explained, it's not just women that experience pain in childbirth. The husband does as well. Because as you watch your children grow up, you see them go their own sinful ways, and boy, that brings as much pain to the fathers as it does to the mothers. And I don't care how great your kids are or your grandkids are, you do experience that pain. And that's the real pain of childbirth that we all experience. So that's the message we see in Genesis chapter 3. That sin means that we're going to experience more pain, more work, and as Ecclesiastes points out, more wasted time. And it's an easy principle. The more sin you commit, the more work you're going to have to do to undo the damage that the sin causes. And the more pain you're going to experience to undo the damage, and the more time you're going to waste. But we humans are biologically designed that none of us likes extra work, extra pain, and wasted time. And so the laws of physics are basically there to motivate us to avoid evil and pursue virtue. And I remember when our sons were growing up, I was trying to instruct them in these principles, saying, look, I know you react to the discipline I give you, but if I don't discipline you, the laws of physics will. I'm just trying to protect you from the laws of physics. Now that they're in their 20s and 30s, what they're saying to me is, Dad, the most painful part of the discipline you put us through was listening to your lectures on the laws of physics. So they tell you things when they get older. So, and it's not just that God works through pain, work, and wasted time. We also see that He's designed the space-time dimensions. One of the things we notice about time, it's a single dimension. It can't be stopped or reversed, which limits the amount of damage that we can do through our sin. And the same thing's true about space. So time limits our number of human contacts. There's a certain number of people we can contact because we're constrained to linear time. And space separates us. If I'm really angry and want to do some damage to my friends in Germany, chances are I can't do much about it. They're just too far away. And then we have a short lifespan. Notice what we see in the Bible. There was a period of time after God created Adam and Eve where He allowed people to live 800, 900, 969 years. But we see in those opening chapters of Genesis, it didn't go well for humanity. When people lived that long period of time, it tilted the advantage in favor of those that were pursuing evil rather than those that were pursuing virtue. I mean, one obvious example, if you allow a serial killer to keep practicing his killing for 900 years, who's he going to kill? Not other serial killers. He's going to be killing the righteous. And so we see in the early chapters of Genesis, the human population quickly evolved to a point where almost everybody was evil. In fact, it tells us in Genesis chapter 6 that outside of Noah and his family, every man, woman, and child, all they could think about all the time was how to do physical harm to their fellow man. It uses words to describe the evil of humanity that we see nowhere else in Scripture, and basically tells us that God acted with the flood to save humanity from extermination. Humanity was in danger of going extinct. In fact, we calculate in our book, Navigating Genesis, in the generations before the flood, the murder rate had to be higher than 95%. That 95% of humanity or more was having their lives being terminated by being murdered by their fellow man. And so God blessed humanity with shorter lifespans. I mean, aren't you glad that Adolf Hitler only lived 56 years and that Joe Stalin only lived 62 years? They were intent on murdering many more millions of people. In fact, Adolf Hitler in the last year of the war said, the German populace is not worthy to survive this war. He had a plan to kill 80 million Germans. But because he had Parkinson's disease and realized he only had months to live, he wound up making very irrational decisions. But the bottom line, tens of millions of people were saved because his lifespan was shortened to just 56 years. Well, what you'll see and why the universe is the way it is, the universe cannot provide us with any possible hope, purpose, or destiny. And I actually got that from our nation's leading atheists. Lawrence Krauss published a paper in the Astrophysical Journal, which basically concluded, if the universe is all there is or was or ever will be, taking a line from Carl Sagan, then we human beings have no hope, no purpose, no ultimate destiny. He was basically making the point, we're headed for the heat death of the universe. The universe is running down. And there'll come a point when the heat flow in the universe will be so low that we can't gain any information. And I love the line he put in the Astrophysical Journal. That's got to be depressing for any scientist, that we're going to reach a point where the heat flow in the universe will be so minimal we will not be able to accumulate knowledge. In fact, it basically condemns all scientists in the world and all other human beings to become dumb and dumber. I think there is a movie with that title. But that's something that the universe guarantees. And he says eventually heat flow becomes so minimal that it's not possible for work to be achieved in the universe, which means all life will go extinct, and that will be the end of all consciousness. And that's how he ended his paper, saying the universe is all there is or was or ever be. There will be an ultimate end where there will be no life and no consciousness, and hence no purpose for anything that's alive in the universe, anywhere else in the universe. No hope, no purpose, no destiny. It's the most depressing paper I ever read in the scientific literature. Now, the fallacy in all that, the mistake in all that, is thinking that the universe is all there is or was or ever will be. And as I mentioned earlier today, what's unique to Christianity, it's a two creation model. It's not a one creation model, it's a two creation model. And I'm going to briefly review that model. And so, God creates and designs the universe and the earth for life. And you see this in Genesis, you see this in Job, Psalm 104. And then it tells us that God places Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, a beautiful paradise. He puts them in the Garden of Eden. But what does he do? He invites Satan to come into the garden. Now, why would he do that? God had a purpose. He could have easily kept Satan and the demons permanently away from planet Earth. But God's intent all along was to bring Satan into the Garden of Eden and allow humans to be tested by evil, the greatest evil that's possible. I mean, Satan was the first one to sin, but the Bible also tells us that Satan was the most powerful and wisest creature that he ever created, which means that Adam and Eve have the opportunity to be subjected to the greatest possible test in the context of evil. Now, let me put that in some context. Number of people here in the audience have PhD degrees. I've got a PhD degree. It's basically a piece of parchment that guarantees that never again will I have to be tested for my competency in my subdiscipline. And the reason why is based on the idea, hey, I've already been subjected to the most challenging tests possible in the context of my subdiscipline, therefore it's pointless to test me again. God likewise is granting us that guarantee. He says, I'm having every human being subjected to the greatest test possible. We're being tempted, we're being tested by Satan and his demons and his human allies. We're all being subjected to the most difficult test possible. But God is the one that conquers evil on the cross. He's the one that says, look, I know you can't pass this test. In fact, I'll give you another analogy. I arrived at the University of Toronto for graduate studies, and there was 13 of us in the freshman astronomy and astrophysics class. The professors sat us down, and they said, you 13 are the cream of the crop. We selected you from all over Canada. We all know that you're brilliant. We all know that you're committed to work exceptionally hard. But we're going to put you through a program here at the University of Toronto that no matter how brilliant you are, no matter how hard you work, you will not pass without our help. But we professors are giving you priority. You can come into our offices at any time. We're here to help you. Now, what I can share with you, of the 13 of us, only 7 of us got the PhD. 6 did not. And of those 6, well, a couple of them wound up in a mental hospital next door. We had a 16-story physics building, and we had a 12-story mental hospital next door. And the joke was we should have had a corridor between the two buildings. And I often found my professors over there when I would go try to visit my fellow students. So some of the students had a mental collapse, but the others were there, did not get their PhDs because they did not avail themselves of the help that the professors were offering. Likewise, God tells us, you're being subjected to this incredibly challenging test, Satan is the one that's subjecting you to this test, and he has all the power of a third of the angels behind him, and also a lot of human allies. You will not pass this test without my help. But if you come to me, I guarantee that you will pass the test. Now, my professors at the University of Toronto did not give me a guarantee. They basically guaranteed I would not pass if it didn't come for them to help. But they didn't guarantee I would pass if I came to them for help. That's what's different about the God of the Bible. It says, come to me for what you can't do for yourself, and I guarantee you'll pass this most challenging test. Moving on. God brings his redemptive offer to all the people groups of the world. God permanently eradicates all evil. There will come a time when the full number of humans that God intends to redeem have been redeemed, and at that time he gathers up all those that want nothing to do with him and are committed to a life of evil, and he eradicates them from his creation. He has a place for them. They'll be permanently separated from the rest of his creation. And then he places redeemed humans in the new creation. And in these redeemed humans, he says, will rule with Christ over the angels and the new creation. And I love what the Apostle Paul says about this. The angels in heaven are intently observing us to learn about this grace that we human beings are experiencing. We get to directly experience the grace of God. The angels can only observe the grace of God. Consequently, we humans who are followers of Jesus Christ are being trained and equipped for ministries and job roles that the angels are not going to be able to fulfill. Right now, the angels are greater than us. A time will come when we will be above the angels, because we've gone through training that they've not gone through. We've gone through the graduate course where we've been subjected to all the suffering and received the grace of God. In the new creation, there will be no death, there will be no decay, there'll be no disease, there'll be no disability. We're all going to have perfect physical bodies that will never be corrupted or decay. You won't have to worry about your chin collapsing as you get older. That's not going to happen. Nothing will decay. In the new creation, relationship limits will be removed, releasing unimaginable joy. Notice we're under constraints. God put us in a single dimension of time where time can't be stopped or reversed. He gave us short lifespans. He constrained us to 3 dimensions of space. He constrained us with gravity and thermodynamics and electromagnetism. All that's in place to ensure that evil doesn't run out of control. But in the new creation, there is no possibility, because the only people in the new creation are those who have passed the most difficult tests. And therefore evil will never again be a temptation for them, in spite of their free will being dramatically enhanced. Therefore, there's no need for gravity anymore. There's no need for thermodynamics, no need for electromagnetism. There's no need for us to be constrained to a single dimension of time or just 3 dimensions of space. And as we read Revelation 21, there are dimensions there. There's an angel with a measuring rod, for example. But I don't think it's going to be the dimensions we experience in this creation. It's going to be different dimensions. You know, one of the things I struggle with when I sign my name in the back of a Gideon Bible committing my life to Jesus Christ is saying, you know, when my life is finished here on earth and I go to heaven, and, you know, when I get my new body, and then I'd be able to relate to all these great, amazing saints that I read about in the Bible, and all these millions and billions of people that are going to be there, and all the angels, how long am I going to have to wait to actually have a private conversation with Abraham, or King David, or the Apostle Paul, or for that matter, James Clerk Maxwell? He's a physicist I really admire, fantastic Christian. How long am I going to have to wait? And I said, well, my name's clear to the end of the alphabet. I may have to wait maybe 10 million years before I can have an appointment with any one of them. And then I realized, no, we're constrained to linear time in this creation because that's necessary to restrain evil. In the new creation, that will no longer be necessary. I believe in the new creation, God's going to release us into geometric time, which means God is going to grant the capability to the Apostle Paul to have 1 billion simultaneous private one-on-one office appointments. We won't have to wait in line to fellowship with one another. You want some evidence of that? It tells us in the new creation there will be no husband and wife relationships. There'll be no families. There'll be no marriage. None of that will be necessary. As I share with my wife, hey, right now we're 3,000 miles apart, so we're not together. But in the new creation, we'll never be apart from one another. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to have, like when I officiate a marriage, I tell the groom and I tell the bride, this day you're committing yourself to say yes to one human being and no to the rest of the human race. That's the only way your marriage can experience the intimacy that God intends. But in the new creation, we'll no longer be constrained to length, width, height, time, and a single time dimension. There'll be no need for marriage because you're going to be in permanent fellowship with every other being that's in the new creation simultaneously. Just think about that for a minute. The idea that we can have an intimate, loving relationship without sin for the rest of eternity with a magnified human free will, where we can do that simultaneously with all the angels and all the human beings and God himself. As it says in 1 Corinthians 2:9, no one can think or imagine how great and wonderful the rewards and the joy and the love will be in the new creation, and how fulfilling our future careers will be. The heavens proclaim his righteousness, and all the people see his glory. Got 14 minutes left for questions. This is your last chance for Q&A. And again, I'll take questions on any topic, but please come to the microphone and please speak within about 4 inches of the microphone.
You want to comment on the 2022 Physics Prize in Quantum Entanglement and what its implications are in society on realism and reality?
Okay, quantum entanglement. Is this a problem for the Christian faith? Well, quantum entanglement did get the Nobel Prize, and quantum entanglement is something that's been discussed in the scientific literature at a deep level for at least the last decade. And yeah, it's complex, it's entangled. It's basically making the point that you can have a quantum particle that can be in 2 places at the same time, and actually in some communication with one another. We're talking huge distances. And people say, how is that possible? Doesn't that violate the velocity of light, etc.? And how can this be? It's all a property of the quantum uncertainty, Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And it's basically saying at the quantum level, there is an uncertainty that we can't get around. So for example, if I choose to measure with high precision the energy of a quantum particle, the uncertainty in its position is about plus or minus 1/3 of a mile. So it's really a big uncertainty. And it's the enormity of that uncertainty which leads to all these paradoxes that we see in quantum mechanics, where you have this quantum entanglement phenomena that is being manifested. But here's something I wrote about in the Crater in the Cosmos 4th edition, and that is that that uncertainty, which leads to all this weird phenomena in quantum mechanics, and by the way, all that weirdness disappears once you get to a bigger ensemble. And so it's basically saying, we don't know what these particles are doing. And moreover, we don't understand the causality. And that's kind of the key of entanglement. There seems to be weird causal effects going on, but the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is basically telling us, as a human observer, we can't detect the causality. That's part of the quantum uncertainty. Now, if we make a measurement, we can disturb the quantum phenomena and we get an outcome. So if you look for particles, that's what you're going to see. If you look for waves, that's what you're going to see. Or to use an illustration, you can take a coin and put it on its edge and spin it rapidly. And if it's spinning rapidly, you don't know whether it's going to lead heads or tails. But if you take your hand and slam it on the coin, you've basically interrupted the system and you've forced it to be heads or tails. But when you put your hand down like that, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. The causality is still hidden. And that's kind of the core of this quantum entanglement. It's not that we human beings cause the outcome, it's that the causality is hidden from view, a direct outcome of the Heisenberg uncertainty. But I'll tell you a story. It was a famous South African theoretical physicist who was going to a meeting, a scientific meeting on theoretical physics. But he happened to walk into the wrong lecture hall, and he found himself in a lecture hall that was filled with nutritionists. But he was going to walk out, but then he heard something. And what he heard was that there are these certain proteins operating within the human body, and the nutritionists weren't commenting on it, but he knew enough theoretical physics to realize those proteins are operating like transistors. And they can only do what they do in the human body if the quantum uncertainty is highly fine-tuned. So he wound up writing a paper making the point, if the quantum uncertainty were any bigger than it is, these proteins would fail to operate and we would all die. And if it's any less than what it is, those proteins would fail to operate and we would all die. So yeah, it's not just transistors in your radio and TV, they're in your human body as well. And they can only function if there's a quantum uncertainty, and even the uncertainty must be fine-tuned. And by the way, there are uncertainties at a non-quantum level. We call them statistical uncertainties. And so there's Brownian motion, where if you look at a bunch of particles, they're bumping into one another. But that Brownian motion, which causes uncertainty in what we see at a statistical level with these particles, likewise must be fine-tuned. And there's a famous story about a debate between Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein. Does God play dice or does he not? And the answer is this: God does play dice, but he carefully designs the dice to get exactly the uncertainty he needs in order that physical life can exist. So thank you for raising the question. Well, if you're all eager to go home, oh no, here comes one.
No,
Okay.
we won't let you escape that easily. It's been great to have you here, obviously. And in one of your discussions this morning, you referenced 1 Peter 3:15 a couple times.
Yes.
And one of the things that so impressed my wife and I was the aspect of your defense of how you've experienced God, and how that was taken to individuals around your community and through your church. Clearly you believe in miracles.
Yes.
And so how does miracles fit within these discussions?
Okay, what I've been sharing with people in our church is when you look at the Exodus, at the beginning of the Exodus, God was performing all these amazing miracles, and people were walking with the Lord. But when they got into the wilderness, and after a few years went by and they weren't experiencing miracles, their faith began to falter. And then they began to get into sin, and God had to rebuke them. And then God performed miracles and brought them back. What I've been sharing with people in our church, yes, we can read about the miracles in the Old Testament and the New Testament, but it's important for our faith to grow that we personally experience miracles from God on an ongoing basis. And basically I was making the point, if you'll put into practice 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to present good reasons for your faith and hope in Jesus Christ with gentleness, respect, and a clear conscience, and you will see God supernaturally bringing people to you that he has prepared in advance to hear and respond to your good reasons. And I've been a pastor for 46 years now, and what I've noticed is people who will build into their life that principle in 1 Peter 3:15 and practice it, they experience miracles on a regular basis. It strengthens their faith. They don't go through the doubts of people that never experience these kinds of miracles. Where is God? Hey, if you're experiencing God performing miracles in your life on a regular basis, it really motivates you to study Scripture. It motivates you to love people. It motivates you to look for opportunities to share your faith, if for no other reason, to experience these miracles. And it's a way to transform your character. And I said, look, if you're not experiencing these miracles on as regular a basis as God intends, maybe you need to work on the gentleness and respect. God's going to send different Christians to these people that he's prepared that are not going to behave in an obnoxious, rude, arrogant way. And so this is a way that God uses to transform our character into the image of Christ. And that's something we stress at Reasons to Believe. We're not only here to prepare good reasons, we're here to help you build that character of boldness. We want people to be courageous in sharing their faith, but humble in the way they do it, and gentle and respectful. Because the unbelievers are going to pay more attention to your demeanor than they do your words. And hey, if you lose a debate, but you win the demeanor war, you're probably won the way. That's what God wants. And people need to see that example. And so I'm convinced, just through my ministry the past 46 years, this is the way you build Christian character. This is the way you build confidence in God's word. And this is the way you build a love in people's lives. And incidentally, I believe what you see in 1 Peter 3:15 needs to be combined with what you see in 1 Peter 4, which basically is an exhortation: practice hospitality. Notice in the Bible, there's no gift of evangelism. There's no gift of hospitality. We're all to be hospitable, and we're all to do the work of sharing the good news of faith in Jesus Christ, sharing good reasons with gentleness and respect. And so we're to combine hospitality. And hospitality is not always feeding people. I believe a lot of hospitality is being available to listen to people, to be compassionate to people, to serve whatever needs they have, whether they be physical, emotional, or spiritual, or intellectual. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Well, if you're all eager to go home, I'll let you go. And if you got questions, oh no, we got one here, okay.
I'll do a follow-up to that one. So I was talking to someone earlier today about miracles and Acts in the book of Acts, and that there is a belief that when Jesus was here, he was performing miracles, and the miracles were done by apostles, and that was a time then for miracles to be performed, but that is not a calling for the people of today. You clearly believe in miracles, so do I. I'll just put that out there. And so I was wondering if you could speak to those who believe that miracles aren't for those of us.
Well, I've spoken at seminaries where I actually address that, because you're right, there's a lot of seminary professors who are convinced those miracles ended with the apostles. They're not happening today. And I say, well, just read the book of Acts. If what you're saying is really true, we would expect to find some conclusion statement at the end of the book of Acts. It's not there. It just stops. And, a passage like that just stops with no closure tells me this is an ongoing experience that the church is to have. And basically, I challenge these professors saying, start sharing your faith with educated non-Christians who've not been raised in the church, who've not been exposed to the Bible. Do that with gentleness and respect. Prepare the good reasons they need, not the good reasons you need. You need to prepare good reasons for them. And put this to the test and see if you don't see miracles happening in your life. And so I'm a scientist. You think I'm wrong? Put me to the test and prove that I'm wrong. The other caveat I would add is when you look at the miracles described in 1 Corinthians 12, there's 9 different miraculous giftings that you see there. My interpretation of that, those are miracles that God bestows upon his people to break down supernatural barriers to the spreading of the gospel. And so I find a lot of skeptics here in the American church who say these miracles aren't happening anymore. I says, well, I kind of go along with you. We don't see supernatural barriers to the spreading of the gospel in most of the United States. But I was in the Soviet Union when the communists were running the show. There were strong supernatural barriers to the spreading of the gospel that existed at that time. And I personally witnessed God performing those miracles that you see in 1 Corinthians 12. I believe they're there for breaking down the supernatural barriers to the gospel. Moreover, when you look at the book of Acts, I think that's consistent. Those miracles were only evident when there were supernatural barriers to the spreading of the gospel. Where there wasn't, Paul and Peter, they would just preach, and people would come to faith in Christ. So when the barriers are not there, there's no need for those gifts. But where they are there, God will equip his people with those gifts. And where I part company with the Pentecostals, I think those gifts come and go. They're there when the barriers are present. When they're not present, God intends that we reach people through the normative means of preaching and teaching and sharing our faith. Yes.
The scientific apologetics that you explained so lucidly is pretty persuasive, and there's a pretty strong case for having a God that created the universe and fine-tuned it, and even the case for him being involved in the natural history of Earth is not too hard to overcome. But from there to having an actual faith that Jesus rose from the dead and that he's the Son of God is another major step. Can you outline 2 or 3 ways you like to use to get people from the sort of the theistic position to the actual faith in Christ?
Well, when people ask me, what's the most powerful evidence for the Christian faith? I answer, it's the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. The problem is getting people to listen to that evidence. And so what we do at Reasons to Believe is we take the revelations and the evidences for God in the book of nature to bring people to a point where they're prepared to listen to the historical case for the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. So I'm on board. That's the best place to go. But my reason why I do what I do, I'm trying to reach an audience that's not prepared to listen to the historical evidence for the bodily resurrection from Jesus from the dead. I run into a lot of Christian apologists who say, I go straight to the core of the evidence for the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And I says, well, look, we're called to give good reasons for people we're engaging that they need. Not what we think are the best reasons, it's the reasons they need. And so when I engage a non-Christian, I ask them lots of questions. I mean, this is something we heard from Greg Koukl. Ask questions. You need to find out what kind of unbeliever you're dealing with, what their issues are, then respond with the appropriate reasons that they need. But my ultimate goal is to get them to a point where they're prepared to listen to the historical evidence for the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And there are many books that have been written on this. One of my favorites is one that comes from the 19th century, where 3 atheist lawyers decided to put on trial the historical case for the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And they all became Christians because what they recognized, the historical evidence for the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead was stronger than the historical evidence that Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo. And they were writing in the mid-19th century when there was all kinds of soldiers around that had fought in that battle. But when you read their book, and you read books by Josh McDowell and many others, particularly I'm trying to think of the gentleman that's writing a 5,000-page book. Gary Habermas. He's actually writing 5,000 pages of evidences, historical evidences for the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. He said that's how voluminous it is. But very briefly, how you try this in a court of law is say, okay, what's the most reasonable explanation for the historical facts? And what you basically have are, okay, what are the alternate explanations? The disciples stole the body, that's the story we see in the Gospels. But is it rational that 11 militarily untrained individuals could overcome a whole cohort of Roman soldiers that were trained individually to defend 9 square meters against all incoming odds? Is that a rational explanation? Is it possible that the Roman leaders stole the body? Well, they did. They could have put the Christian faith to rest just by producing the body. They never did. Likewise, the Jewish leaders. If they had the body, they would have produced it, but they never did. And if you read the book of Acts, what you see in the days following the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead, about half the population of Jerusalem became followers of Jesus Christ. Why? The empty tomb was right there for them to see. And also, if you read carefully in the book of John and the Gospels, that when the body of Jesus was prepared, he was given a rich man's burial. And what does it tell us? 75 pounds minimum. It was a talent of rosin encompassed his body. and linen and rosin, 75 to 100 pounds worth. That would have set equivalent to a fiberglass case about 3 inches thick all around his body, all the way up to his neck, and then there was a headpiece that was put over him. What you see recorded in the Gospel of John is that John and Peter walked into the empty tomb, and they saw the body cast, and they saw the headcloth, and immediately they believed in the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Now, consider this. If you saw the equivalent of a fiberglass body cast that was empty, with no cut in the body cast, no hole in the body cast, what would you conclude? There's a reason why they instantaneously became believers. That's just a little bit of the evidence that's there. But again, my job is to get people to the point where they're prepared to hear that case. But Paul put it this way. If the bodily resurrection of Jesus from the dead really happened, then we can be confident that God will raise us bodily from the dead. If it didn't happen, we're to be pitied amongst all people because we have believed a lie. When I did my debate with Peter Atkins in London a couple of years ago, I was asked by the moderator, can you name some discoveries in science that would cause you to abandon your Christian faith and become an atheist like Peter Atkins? I said, yeah. If we can prove beyond any shadow of doubt the universe didn't have a beginning, that would be catastrophic to the Christian faith. If we could prove that we human beings are not exceptional amongst life on planet Earth, that we just differ in kind from the animals, differ in degree, not in kind from the animals, that would be catastrophic to the Christian faith. It would be a damage to the doctrine that we are created in the image of God. And if we can prove scientifically that Jesus did not rise bodily from the dead, that would put an end to the Christian faith. But I love what the moderator next did. He turned to Peter Atkins and said, can you name some scientific discoveries that would cause you to abandon your atheism and join Hugh as a Christian? And he said, well, I suppose if God were to appear physically in front of me and tell me he was God, that would be persuasive. On the other hand, I would think I was just being delusional and I needed to go see a psychiatrist. Bottom line was, he wouldn't concede a single event that could possibly persuade him from his atheism. And if you watch the debate, you can watch it for free on YouTube. For an hour, he was basically accusing me of being stupid and lazy, and basically saying you have to base your life, your worldview on scientific evidence. But when push came to shove, he wouldn't go there. Whereas I, as a Christian, was prepared to go there. So, yes, we need to become more skilled in how we share our faith. And but again, I say, start with the questions your non-Christian friend has, and be patient to get to the real stuff you want to present.
You started out with your your day-age interpretation of Genesis, which you're well known for. What other Christians have other views of Genesis? Which ones would overlap or complement yours, if any?
Yes, no, there are a lot that complement the view that we promote at Reasons to Believe. I mean, C. John Collins, Jack Collins, a very well-known theologian, he's promoted what he calls maybe you can help me with this. He basically says the days in Genesis are not defined. Not the framework view, he's got another name for it. Basically saying, when you read Genesis carefully, it doesn't give you the time span of the creation days. But he says it's certainly longer than 24 hours. And I would agree with him. Nowhere in the Bible does it tell you how long each creation day is. It just simply says it's longer than 24 hours. Then you got the view promoted by John Lennox, where he says, I believe that the creation days are 24 hours, but it introduces an age that goes on between each day. It's called the day-age view, where you have a 24-hour period, it's the intermittent day-age view, 24-hour period, followed by an age, then you get another 24-hour period. And then there's a revelatory view where God basically says, this is what I'm going to do on day 2. And so he takes 24 hours to tell you what he's going to but what he does actually takes hundreds of millions of years in each of the creation days. And then there's a framework view, but the framework view is different in that they say, yes, the days have an indeterminate period of time, but it's set up as a triad, where you got creation days 1, 2, and 3, where God basically creates the different entities, and in creation's day 4, 5, and 6, he fills them. And we have been in debates with the framework people, for a good 30 years now, and what we discovered is they're really not prepared to say that there's a strict chronology in the days. And so they say, yes, the days are revealing what God did in creation. It's indeterminate on the time scale, but it's not chronological. But as we've been engaging people like Lee Irons, he says, well, to be honest, we really do believe in some chronology. We believe that God creates the universe first and human beings last. We're just not prepared to take a stand on everything between the universe and human beings. But says, keep in mind, we're not scientists. We don't have the confidence that your team at Reasons to Believe has that everything indeed is in the correct chronological order. But I've noticed when I actually show people what you see in Navigating Genesis, is like, this is an open and shut case. It's clear that these are all in the correct chronological order. Moreover, it's very difficult theologically, exegetically, to read Genesis 1 in anything other than a chronological sequence. Because it's not just that God is numbering the days. Day 1, day 2, day 3, that communicates it's a chronology. But notice after each day, you have God saying, it was good. It was good. And it has God saying, and it was so. So these are little clues that you see in the Hebrew language, basically designed to communicate to those that are fluent in Hebrew, this is an actual chronology. In fact, you'll find 4 distinct clues in Genesis 1 that this is a chronological account, and you find that nowhere else in the Old Testament. It's unique to Genesis 1. In my opinion, there's no getting around that is describing an actual chronology of events. And I see my time is up.